Welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Donna Lucas, and I'd love to welcome you here on behalf of the Public Policy Institute of California's Board of Directors. And we are pleased to present this program today on climate change and California's future. This event is part of PPIC's 2015 Speaker Series on California's future. I'd like to thank our sponsors for underwriting this support. These organizations are listed on the screen over here and on the back of your program. Please take a moment to see these great folks who support us, and I'd like to thank them personally. This series is also funded by PPIC's Donor Circle, a group of individuals and organizations that provide generous support to PPIC. Funding from our sponsors and donors make programs like today possible and ensures that they are free and open to the public. Their support also ensures that we can do a live broadcast and reach an even wider audience. So I want to thank them again, thank our donor circle, and thank everyone for doing this. Thank you. Just a note, all of you can join the PPIC donor circle. You can learn more about that by going to our website or checking with one of our amazing staff people who are here today. So before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. Before you leave today, there's an evaluation form on your table. If you could take a few minutes and fill that out and give us some insight on how you thought the program went today. And also, I'd like to remind you to silence your cell phones. You don't want them to go off in the middle of the program. And I am absolutely thrilled with this amazing program, and I really want to personally thank the sponsors. Especially, I have to give a shout out to Mayor Kevin Faulconer, who came all the way from San Diego, is a former colleague of mine, and we're really happy to have you in Sacramento. Not to diminish anyone else on this amazing panel. So now I'd like to go on to the program where Mark Baldassare, we've come up, President of PPIC, to introduce our panel members. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate your presence here today. I'm going to make just a few remarks for a few moments to set the context for the panel discussion that is that's going to take place, and just try to give you a sense of what the policy environment is like right now in climate change. First of all, I think all of you know that California has for decades led the way on environmental issues, from improving air quality, conserving open space, protecting the coastline. And California has done that with a lot of support from the public. In the polling that we do at the Public Policy Institute of California, for instance, in our most recent poll, majorities of Californians said that stricter environmental laws and regulations are worth the cost. Fewer than half said they cost too many jobs and hurt the economy. Despite the fact that there's increasing evidence that climate change is posing a major threat here and abroad, we note that the federal government and international community has been slow to act. On the other hand, California has been responding since the early 2000s. With some of the most far-reaching policies in the world. Notably, in 2006, Republican Arnold Schwarzenegger joined Democratic legislators and signed AB 32. It committed California to reverse the trend of rising greenhouse gas emissions and to lower those emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2020. It was hailed as a watershed moment in California history that would have far-reaching consequences nationally and internationally. In the years that followed, the governor and legislature worked to comply with the law by adopting a number of major policy changes, among those the creating a market price for carbon through the cap-and-trade program. And then in 2010, a campaign led by Democrat Tom Steyer, Republican George Shultz, persuaded voters to reject Proposition 23, an initiative that would have suspended AB 32. 2 years later, in 2012, an initiative passed Proposition 39 that closed corporate tax loopholes to pay for clean energy products. So all of this suggests that the state's response to climate changes seems to have the support from the public at large. And our PPIC polling indicates that as well. In our most recent environment survey conducted last July, 68% of Californians said they favored the emission goals identified in AB 32. What was significant about those findings is that the majorities cut across racial and ethnic groups, demographic groups, and economic groups in California, and regional groups. Majorities have also expressed a preference for the state making its own policies to address global warming. One reason the state's response to climate change has had such strong public support is the high level of concern that Californians have expressed for this issue. In our poll last December, 76% of adults said that global warming is a very serious threat, or somewhat serious threat, to the economy and quality of life in California. Another explanation is California's support for is the perceived economic benefit of state policies. Also in our poll last December, 43% of adults said that California's efforts to reduce global warming will result in more jobs, compared to 21% who said that it will result in fewer jobs, while 29% said that it won't affect the job numbers at all. Today, California climate change policy has reached another pivotal moment, and that's what brings us to this program that we're having today. Last year, the State Air Resources Board declared that California is now on track to achieve its greenhouse gas emission goals by 2020, just 5 years from now. Earlier this year, Governor Brown and state legislators proposed that California recalibrate its climate change policies with a new set of goals, reaching further into the future. As before, the new goals are ambitious and contentious. In January, Governor Brown proposed 3 new goals to be accomplished in the next 15 years. First, to increase the amount of electricity produced from renewable sources from 1/3 to 50%. Second, reduce today's petroleum use in cars and trucks by up to 50%. And third, double the energy efficiency of buildings. SB 350 by Senators Kevin De Leon and Mark Leno reflect the governor's new goals for 2030, and SB 32 by Fran Pavley would set greenhouse gas emissions in the year 2050 at 80% below the level reported in 1990. There is much to consider in setting these goals, and we know that change of this magnitude will not be easy. We know that from the governor's perspective, that as he said in his inaugural address, this is exciting, it's bold, and he described it as absolutely necessary if we're to have any chance of stopping potentially catastrophic changes to our climate system. We know that California can benefit from innovation, technologies, and new jobs that are created by these policy changes, but we also know that achieving these goals will have costs and will require lifestyle changes. We also know that climate change policies, both those today and those proposed for the future, will affect every Californian. And to talk about some of the experiences so far and the issues raised by the new set of climate change goals, we've put together a bipartisan panel that reflects several key perspectives. The panel includes state and local government representatives, as well as business leaders from different sectors of the economy. All of our panelists share a keen interest in today's topic. The state's climate change policies are among the most difficult and important issues to surface this year. We hope that a public dialogue about the challenges that we face, the goals under consideration, and the trade-offs involved in upcoming policy choices will help California to achieve its brightest future. I would like to introduce our panel moderator, Greg Dalton, who will be coming up on stage here in a moment. Greg is a distinguished journalist a founder, executive producer, and host of the weekly radio show Climate One. You can listen to the program on public radio across Northern California. Greg, we're so pleased you can be here today, and I'd like to now invite our panel to the stage, and we look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, yes,
Thank you.
we definitely.
I'd like to welcome our panel. Get seated. Yes, there we go. Mayor, good to see you.
Sure.
Welcome, everyone. A lot to talk about, and we have about an hour to do so. While the panel gets settled, I'd like to invite you to just shout out a couple of words, one word or two words that you'd like this panel to discuss. We're going to have audience questions at the end, but we'd like to get front-loaded here some ideas that are on your mind. Just one or two words. You can just shout it out. Sorry? Drought. Yeah, okay.
Natural gas.
Get natural gas. What else?
You'll get that from this panel.
Resiliency. Resiliency. Okay, some adaptation. This is very mitigation focused. One more. Fracking. Okay, all right. We got fracking, water, lots of things. So very happy to have here, right here, Mayor Kevin Faulconer. Thank you for paddling up here in a low-carbon way from San Diego today.
Thank you.
And Dorothy Rothrock is president of the California Manufacturers and Technology Association. Ken Alex, who's director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and a senior advisor to Governor Brown, and Carl Guardino, who's president and CEO of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. We're going to have each person give 3 minutes presentation on whether California is headed in the right direction on climate or not, and then we're going to have a conversation and include your questions at the end. And I'd like to begin with Dorothy. Is California headed in the right direction on energy and climate?
Well, AB 32 was created mostly to be a model for other states and to push the federal government to adopt a policy, but up until now, cap and trade particularly was built around the idea that other Western states would participate, and at this point, none others are, which is of great concern. I think one reason is that they believe cap and trade is going to raise costs on their consumers and businesses and won't be good for their state. The data for manufacturing in California is a bit of a warning. We have, since the recession ended in January 2010, the U.S. has grown manufacturing jobs by 7.5%, but California has only grown by 2%. Manufacturing here is still big. We have 11% of the U.S. manufacturing here, but since 2001, we've only attracted 2% of the U.S. manufacturing. So that means people are not voting with their pocketbooks to invest in new sites or expansions in the state. I think energy costs are a big reason for this. Now the average rates for manufacturers for electricity are 70% higher than the national average. It used to be 50% higher, so we're moving in the wrong direction. When you add this electricity costs to higher gasoline, diesel, and other costs, it's a heavy burden, and it's bound to get worse because the more expensive era for AB 32 is really just now starting. The years between 2015 and 2020 are going to be much more expensive than the years prior as certain policies really hit the ground and go further. The irony, and I'll conclude with this, is that if manufacturing grows out of the state instead of in the state, global emissions could actually increase because our electricity supply, energy supply is so much cleaner in California. And that would be a bad environmental result as well as a bad economic result for California.
Carl Guardino, let's hear from you. Is California headed in the right direction on climate?
Overwhelmingly, yes, but we have to depend on disruptive technologies and know that there are still difficult choices that we need to make in terms of policy. There was a pretty popular TV show a few years ago called 24. And while I'm no Jack Bauer, let me give you 24 hours in my life, now or within the next 2 years, why I am bullish as to why California's disruptive technology companies or the use of technology can further ensure that we have a strong economy and a healthy environment to meet our greenhouse gas emissions goals for 2020, 2030, and beyond. So, 4:30, I wake up to my energy-efficient, temperature-controlled home that I control through my programmable thermostat Nest that I control through an app on my iPhone 6. I pull my clothes out of my Samsung Energy Star rated dryer, which I ran overnight to take advantage of time of use pricing. I take a shower with water softened by Eco Water Systems HydroLink Plus, which softens and treats water while monitoring my water usage. I don't fully turn the water off as I get out. HydroLink Plus alerts me via text that there is continuous water flow, and I return to the shower to switch it off, and then my HydroLink Plus can do the same with my toilet if it runs continuously. I check my water use and energy use online with my WaterSmart software, reminding me with analytics how my water use measures up, and my Watts On Energy Center gives me online analytics to measure my energy use. At 7 a.m., I jump on my specialized bike that is designed right in Silicon Valley for my 17-mile each way, each day commute, which saves my plug-in hybrid electric Prius that averages 79 miles to the gallon, which saves me $4,250 in fuel costs over 5 years compared to average 2015 cars sold in California. My car was charged overnight with energy from PG&E, and when I drive to work, meetings, errands, I use my ChargePoint app to find a ChargePoint charging station. My StreetLine app helps me avoid the 30% of traffic congestion caused in urban areas created solely by drivers looking for a place to park. As I commute to work, I pass the downtown San Jose Caltrain station, which will be fully electrified by 2021, allowing us to increase ridership over the next decade from 60,000 to 100,000 weekday passenger trips, with more than 3 out of 5 of those riders owning a car but leaving it at home to jump on Caltrain instead. While I'm on my bike, I pass a Proterra all-electric bus built right here in California, providing great middle-class manufacturing jobs. Another Tesla passes me by, followed by a Leaf and a Volt, and I consider all those Tesla manufacturing jobs in Fremont, which displaced the boarded-up Toyota plant closed nearly a decade ago. I get to work and the lighting sensors go on when I walk in thanks to the Lutron Maestro occupancy sensing switch. I grab my Intelligent Energy Up fuel cell phone recharger, which I can use anywhere, regardless of whether I can find an outlet. I store my lunch in our communal Energy Star rated GE refrigerator, fire up my Energy Star rated Apple desktop computer for a day of work. And if we have time later, I'll tell you about my commute home and what we do in the evening.
On time. There's a riff sponsors can love. Very, very compelling. Can Alex top that?
I think I might go in a different direction.
There's room on my bike.
Swim in the bay in the
I
morning.
am not going 17 miles. I only go 5. So I guess it would be a bit of an upset if I said that I thought we're going in the wrong direction. So I, of course, think that we're heading in the right direction, and I want to take us back 10 years. 10 years ago, 2005, did you think that we would be at 25% renewables? Did you think we would have approaching 150,000 electric vehicles on the road with many, many new models coming out from all around the world? Did you think that we would be revamping how we talk about vehicle miles traveled and land use? On and on and on. In 10 years, we are in California in a very different place than we were just 10 years ago. We've gone through a recession. We've come out and are continuing to come out the other side as our economy grows faster than the rest of the United States, with an economy that is now moving into 33% renewables and hopefully well beyond, with greener and cleaner and more sustainable manufacturing and land use. And now we're going to have to think about what we do for an encore over the next 15 years, where, as Dorothy says, it gets more difficult. But what we're able to do in California, as the governor likes to say, the 7th largest economy in the world if we were our own country, is that we are changing dramatically the nature of our relationship to the environment and to climate. Now, I don't want to go too far into the statistics, but the manufacturing statistics that Dorothy quoted are about investments of $50 million or greater. In fact, in where most of California's manufacturing are in smaller investments, and we lead the country. We have twice the number of manufacturing jobs here in California of the next largest state, which is Texas. Our electricity rates are indeed among the highest in the country, but our electricity costs are dead in the middle, about 23rd in the nation, because we have far greater energy efficiency, and we're going to improve on that. And if I have time later, I'll talk about some of the issues around working in natural lands, where California is starting to think about what the next set of changes should be. Greg.
Cow manure is going to save us. But before that, Mayor Faulconer, is California headed in the right direction?
I still have all of Carl's visuals in my head. The answer is yes, and it's not easy. You know, one of the things that we look at, and I'm glad a lot of my colleagues on the panel here talked about, I think a lot of the topics that are incredibly important, particularly from a jobs standpoint, particularly from a sustainability standpoint. You know, I view it, and we view it down in San Diego, as a critically important part of who we are, not just as San Diegans, but as Californians that care deeply about our environment, care deeply about the future that we're leaving for all of our children, but also understand that how do we marriage that with economic growth and the things that we should be doing. You know, in San Diego, I put forward a climate action plan this year that I'm very proud of. That's going to be before the full city council. That we worked together with the business community, with environmental folks, to say this is the exact type of thing that we should be doing. When we look at San Diego's case, our goal for 100% renewable energy by 2035. It won't be easy, but we can achieve it. The things we're already doing with electrical vehicle infrastructure, the things we're moving forward in terms of new construction, having it pre-wired, not just for electric vehicles, but also for solar panels, that when you look at it from a cost standpoint, relatively inexpensive compared with the overall benefits that I think that we can achieve here, not just in San Diego, but certainly across the state. So as we look at making sure that we have plans in our plan in San Diego that is achievable, that we work with all of our stakeholders. Are they stretch goals? You bet they are. But you're not going to achieve them unless you put them out there and say, how can we work together with everybody around the table? So just like we're doing in San Diego, it's incumbent upon all of us statewide, because we care about the water that we're drinking, that we swim in, that the air that we breathe. And in fact, I would just say, when we're talking about California, increasingly what we're spending a lot of time on in San Diego is our relationships with our neighbors to the south in Tijuana, in our northern Baja region. We just started a memorandum of understanding where our folks in our city, our departments, are interacting with now on a monthly basis our counterparts in Tijuana. And one of the things we're talking about, again, is from an environmental standpoint, water, runoff, air, ocean quality, all extremely important to our quality of life, and all extremely important to our economy.
Did you receive resistance to your climate plan in San Diego from people who said, it's going to cost too much, hurt too much?
Sure. When you're married, you receive resistance from everything. But at the same time, you know, as I said at the beginning, we're very proud of obviously our location, our climate in San Diego, and it's part of our outdoor lifestyle. People realize how important that is, but it was one of the reasons why when we were developing and drafting the plan, sat down with the Chamber of Commerce, sat down with the Building Industry Association, sat down with the realtors, sat down with our environmental coalition to say, guys, we're all in this together. I've always believed that even if you're going to have different views and opinions, you put people around the table, treat people with dignity, respect. Even if you have some disagreements, you can usually come to a goal that makes sense. And in this case, as we look upon what we're going to be doing for not just 2020, but 2035, having that dialogue and that shared value and vision, a lot of why we're here today, that's the only way you can achieve real results and true success.
Dorothy Rothrock, we just heard a mayor, Republican mayor, I think?
Yeah.
Just checking, that jobs in the economy don't have to be at odds, that they can actually be aligned, and what's good for one could be good for the other.
Well,
Is that true?
we agree that jobs and the economy can go together, but it needs to be mutually supportive. The wealthier we are as a state, the better we'll be at adopting new technologies to further reduce emissions. We'll be better at making infrastructure investments to deal with actual climate change. What we're concerned about is at this point, it looks like we're becoming more and more uncompetitive as a state for manufacturing, which will help scare off other states from wanting to embrace some of our policies. Why is it, if cap and trade is so wonderful, that the other Western states have not embraced it yet?
There were governor elections changed, a couple of reasons there, and Quebec is part of it. But Carl Guardino, one of the raps against Silicon Valley is oftentimes they innovate in Silicon Valley and they manufacture offshore. Of those wonderful things that you rattled off, Tesla obviously made here. Will Nest be made here? Will some of those gadgets be made in America, made in California?
And I didn't even get to my evening where my SunPower roof, manufactured in Milpitas, provides energy for my home 330 sunny days a year in Silicon Valley. The fact of the matter is, our great global companies, whether they're scrappy startups or iconic brands, are located and compete around the globe because our markets are around the globe. And that isn't going to change. Do we have manufacturing in California, especially advanced manufacturing? Yes, we do. Can we have more if we all work together in policy-driven solutions? Yes, we can. But will everything always be done in California? No, and candidly, we'd be a little arrogant and naive to think we should or that it could. 95% of the world's population is outside of the United States. 95% of our markets are outside of the United States. You have supply chains, facilities, employees to serve those customers around the world. That's the reality. But that part that is policy driven as reasons to either be here, and there are a lot of good ones, or to not be here, and there are examples of egregious ones that aren't good, we need to work on together right here in Sacramento.
Ken, Alex, one of the big fights in California is about there's now a pretty considerable amount of revenue being generated from California's climate program, cap and trade. Where should that money go? You have a hand in directing some of it, but I want to get the mayor in here about where money should go that's coming from this new price on carbon in California.
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't heard yet anybody with any ideas as to where to spend the money.
Well, okay, talk to Ken afterwards if you have some ideas.
So the legislature and the governor have an extensive plan for expenditures and continuing appropriation, which is fairly rare. As most of you know, budgets are done year at a time. The cap and trade money, about 75% of it is set as a continuing resolution. Some of that money goes to local communities for projects that promote transit-oriented development. Some of the money goes to agricultural uses for things like electrifying pumping. A lot of it is around freight right now. High-speed rail is a big recipient of cap and trade money. And as the revenues increase, the 25% that is not currently designated will be a significant amount of money. We are actually currently going through a process to ask for further ideas from state agencies that have programs, from local governments, and from the public.
Local governments, Mayor Faulconer, what would you like from the state cap and trade program?
I would agree that when you look at a lot of the projects that are making a real difference are at the local level, so sign me up for the dollars coming to cities. But I just wanted to jump in on something that Carl just said in terms of innovation and new technologies and new companies that are springing up all across the state because of our leadership role. I mean, the collective we. In San Diego, we have about 800 companies that are involved in the clean technology field. I mean, that is astounding. In fact, we have a Clean Tech San Diego, an organization that just started back in 2007 to help grow that, to help foster that. These are technologies, whether it's biofuels and algae, whether it's filters, desalinization, that we are proud to be on the cutting edge of, that is not only obviously are putting to use here in California, but across the country and indeed across the world. And so as we look at that, those investments, those innovations, those companies that start, not only those are good quality jobs, we're helping to define what the standards are going to be for the future. And that is something that, that I promote and foster as mayor every chance that I get. Because when we talk about the investment in back-end, it's not going to be inexpensive. At the same time, we are working on a fairly ambitious recycled water project in the city of San Diego. Somebody yelled out drought, that you wanted to have us touch on drought at some point today. From a sustainability standpoint, my job is to make sure that when you turn on the tap in San Diego, you're going to have the water. And when we look at us being dependent upon other resources from other parts of the state, everything we can do in recycled water's case, when we build that, not if, when we get that online, we're going to have a third of our local water supply in San Diego for our entire city from recycled water. That's, I think, the type of thing that we have to do. It's not just a short-term view, but from a sustainability standpoint, that's where local governments and state governments, I think, have to be planning out for the future.
And one part of what San Diego is doing, something we don't hear about a lot, is blue technology, marine technology. San Diego is a real leader there, which is, a lot of people don't think of the ocean as an economic opportunity.
We sure do in San Diego. And in fact, talking to Kristen Tulkus, to my team who's here, we just had a roundtable in my office 2 weeks ago of a lot of our blue technology leaders. And in fact, one of the things we're going to be starting in San Diego is a blue tech incubator. Because of, to your point, how these companies are growing that didn't even exist in some cases 3 or 4 years ago. We want them to stay in San Diego, we want them to start, we want them to grow and share that technology from the world. So as the issues of water and the issues of ocean are so incredibly important to our economy in San Diego, it's a competitive advantage for us, it's good for the environment, and it's something that as mayor I'm very proud of.
Carl Guardino.
Thank you. I want to build on what Mayor Faulconer said, which I agree with. But first, a caveat. Any job in California that's an honest job by a hard-working California trying to support a family, whether it's high-tech, low-tech, or no-tech, I like, personally. But when we talk about advanced energy jobs, we are growing at an incredible rate. We have more than 430,000 workers directly in advanced energy jobs in California. That is more than TV and film, semiconductor, which is a key area of Silicon Valley, and aerospace combined. So all jobs, I think, are good, but our advanced energy jobs are really growing, and it's very exciting for what we can do for technology application on climate, as well as applying technology to climate solutions.
We're here in Sacramento. As Mark mentioned in the introduction, there's several bills, SB 32, SB 350, trying to move forward, both lock in AB 32 further out for a longer period, and also some of the governor's proposals. Carl Guardino, is the Silicon Valley Leadership Group behind those bills, behind that agenda?
Well, first, looking back in 2006, we were one of the first, if not the first, business group in California to embrace and support AB 32. We thought it was good then. We think it's even better now. It's great to be able to look back at that success and build towards it. As we look at Fran Pavley's new bill, SB 32, and Senate Pro Tem De Leon's SB 350, this is where I think we would all agree details matter. And right now, there are some aspirational goals captured in the outlines of those bills with the details still needed to be filled in. That's where all of us as stakeholders in California need to be working with Fran and Kevin and their counterparts to make sure that we do this right. I have a great deal of respect for our friends in the Central Valley who haven't always enjoyed the economic prosperity that we've enjoyed in coastal cities in California. How does this impact our Central Valley residents, where the unemployment rates are still 10, 15, 20, even 40% in some areas? And how do we make sure that we do this in a way that's both environmentally and economically sustainable? AB 32 taught us we can do that. We just need to make sure we do it right again.
When I parked my car coming up here, I looked at my Twitter feed and there was a rebuttal to the agenda from the Hoover Institute that's on the Climate One Twitter feed at Climate One. And Hoover says that, pushing back on that, Dorothy Rothrock, do you agree with the agenda in terms of cutting petroleum consumption, increasing building efficiency, and et cetera? Okay,
so my name's Dorothy, but it's actually Debbie Downer. Wah, wah. Could I say a few things in response to some of the things that have been said on the panel up to this point?
Sure, and then we'll get to what you think the agenda is. Sure.
First of all, I really appreciate sort of anecdotal information about jobs that are being created with the new green economy. And we like those jobs as much as you do, Carl, in Silicon Valley and in San Diego. But we've got to look at the whole economy, and we've got to understand the trade-offs that we're making. Since the start of the recession, we've been growing lower wage jobs than before. So the jobs that we've gained since the start of the recession average 52,000. We've lost jobs that average 74,000. A lot of things are going into that, but we can't ignore this reality. What's happening in the Central Valley is horrible. We've got barbell economies all over the state. A policy that works in San Diego might not work somewhere else, but yet we have a statewide plan here that perhaps doesn't respect the needs of those various communities. So I think that's something we really got to face. And also the potential costs of AB 32, we have not seen those yet, nor do we really understand what the costs of all those programs are. One of our big concerns is that, not that we're trying to make a difference in this, is that we may be doing things in ways that are more expensive than they need to be. And we're very concerned that between now and 2020, we have a program where prices in the cap and trade market may skyrocket. It may, simply because of the drought. We're going to create a lot of pressure on the electric system, and there's going to be more natural gas-fired plants running. That's going to put more pressure in cap and trade to keep those allowances flowing for that purpose. You look at gasoline and transportation fuels under the cap. If we have some growth in the economy, that's going to increase demand for driving, that's going to increase demand for allowances, that's going to cause cap and trade to go up. To the extent manufacturers have to buy allowances to keep operating in the state, it's going to cost more and more and more. It's no wonder they're holding back their investment dollars. And actually, Ken, I think the truth is it's a $1 million investments is what's tracked by the data that I've got. And no one can disagree with the jobs numbers that I showed you, about 7% in the US and 2% in California. That is the economy voting on our policies in the state. And so let's get it right and do it in a trajectory that makes sense. On the 50-50-50, that's probably too aggressive, too fast. It's going to be too expensive. And what is it that we need to get the rest of the country to go along? We need to be doing something that's sensible, that they'll want to follow and do, as opposed to something that's too far out there and they'll go, oh, that's California, there they go again, let's watch and build manufacturing here in the state instead of there.
How urgent an issue do you think climate change is?
Climate change as a worldwide phenomenon? Let's assume it's the most important thing, which makes it that much more important that we have to get it right in California. Because if we're showing the way, but no one else follows, we will have the worst of both worlds. We'll have an expensive economy and climate change.
Mayor Faulconer, what impacts of climate change are you seeing in San Diego today?
I think it's something that we're all preparing, for what does the future hold? We talk about, what are the potential ramifications of sea level rise, when, et cetera. Obviously, from an air quality standpoint, from a water quality standpoint, as I said, that's important for our DNA as Californians. And I think what we've seen in San Diego is the discussion, and one of the things that I tried to foster when we were developing our climate action plan was in bringing everybody around to the table. What are those common goals that we can get to that gives us our best opportunity for success? That is, I think when we brought in representatives from the business community and others, we talked about, as I mentioned before, the pre-wiring of all new construction. That just seemed to make common sense. And that prepares us for the future for folks to take advantage of. Things like our disclosure ordinance, when you sell your house, We would disclose what the energy usage is and the water usage. That, I think, just makes common sense to people so they can make that choice when they're going to be purchasing their house. So I think as we plan and prepare for the future, to the point we have to make sure that we're taking the steps that not only make sense, are affordable, but are looking beyond just what's happening right now in terms of where we see things coming 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now.
One thing you didn't do, and San Francisco and other cities have done, is commit to specific reductions in greenhouse gases. Is that something you entertained that you might do?
Yeah, no, it is, because we talked about 100% renewables. We talked about cutting our greenhouse gases by 50%, and we also tied it to our general plan. And I'm glad somebody out here talked about transit-oriented development. From a planning standpoint, on a city standpoint, that's incredibly important. So we're making transportation decisions. We're updating all of our local community plans here in the city of San Diego, and I'm spending a lot of time and dollars on that to say, where do you want growth to occur? Well, guess what? It's going to be close to the trolley in San Diego, or it's going to be close to centers that we have economic activity. So it's not about continuing to sprawl out. It's about let's make those choices more convenient, more affordable, and guess what? We're seeing that. For example, if some of you haven't been to downtown San Diego in quite some time, you're seeing a tremendous growth in that urban lifestyle. Not for everybody, but people are doing it. It proves that if you make those planning choices. And so as we're extending the trolley from out to UCSD and other places where it doesn't go to now, one of our leading innovation technology hubs, that's important. And so land use and planning decisions, I think, go hand in hand, which is one of the reasons why we've tied our climate action plan to our city's general plan.
There's a there downtown San Diego after a long time not being much there. Carl Guardino, one of the big fights happening right now is over net metering between utilities and solar companies. If you have solar on your roof, as I do, you understand. Do you have a view on net metering, whether that should be repealed, et cetera? Not on your radar?
I never bluff, and net metering is not my area of expertise. I do want to build on something that
Sure.
Kevin said, but I will freely admit that net metering is not my area of expertise.
I'll come back
Other
to Ken
people
on
on
that,
my
but-
team are. But what Kevin said about transportation solutions and its impact on climate and greenhouse gases cannot be underscored enough. 36% of California's greenhouse gas emissions are from our daily transportation choices. So the more that we are providing alternatives to traditional cars, and we've mentioned several examples in terms of all electric, partially electric, autonomous vehicles are going to squeeze out more efficiency in our roadways when those come about, and it's not very far off. The technology is outpacing the regulatory changes, going completely from 4 wheels to 2 wheels or 2 feet, or to transit solutions, as the mayor talked about. The land use choices that allows us to have in our communities are going to be huge benefits. How we as a state invest those cap and trade funds, it's over 40% currently for transportation choices, a lot of those in competitive pots that can be truly game changers, we think is important. And it's not just great big cities like San Diego or San Jose or San Francisco or Oakland, major population centers, but they make sense in all of our communities as well. They're going to make a big difference. And I can get back to folks through PPIC on where we are on net metering.
Great, sure. Ken Alex, there's a net metering law, very important in this state. The solar companies want to keep it as it is. The utilities want to kill it. Give us a brief update on that.
Well, it's in front of the PUC, and I think there's arguments on both sides. Not surprisingly, I think there'll be changes. There is a consideration of a set charge for people who put solar on their roofs, because there's a cost associated with the system that feeds their power. And we'll see how it comes out. I think there are reasons to start to move away from net metering, and there have been criticisms that rooftop solar has been a middle class and upper middle class benefit paid for by all ratepayers. Well, we need to think that through and make sure that the benefit goes across to everybody. and continue to make sure that, among the very fastest growing businesses in the entire country are rooftop solar operations, and we need to continue that. So somewhere in there, there'll be a balance.
And helping our middle class, I don't view as a bad thing. As was mentioned earlier, with a barbell economy, we need more meat in the middle of those bars around a middle class. And a lot of those jobs in rooftop solar are boots on the ground or boots on the roof type of jobs, which are great middle and upper middle class jobs that we should covet in California.
We're going to go to our lightning round just to wake you up a little bit after your wonderful lunch and to.
Can I just say
Sure.
something way over here on the I don't know if I'm in the right wing or the left wing here. But I do want to say why California. Look, we just saw the Senate Majority Leader for the United States Senate send a letter to every governor in the United States saying why those states should stand up and have civil disobedience to protect coal companies. Well, California has a different view of the emergency nature of climate change and the need for action in the United States. And we're going to continue to operate in this fashion and push this discussion. And the governor is absolutely committed to doing so. And the country is not there yet, and we need to make sure that we tell the rest of the country and the world, again as the 7th largest economy, that this is possible, that it's doable, that our economy will continue to grow as we convert to a clean energy.
Good segue into our first question of the lightning round. We're going to have a couple of questions for each panelist. The first one is fill in the blank, so first word that comes to mind to complete this sentence. Kevin Faulconer, Republicans who publicly deny climate disruption and privately acknowledge it are?
Opportunity to change.
Dorothy Rothrock, environmentalists are?
Some of my best friends.
Ken Alex, climate advocates who make apocalyptic predictions are?
Wrong.
Carl Guardino, the leading Silicon Valley CEO on climate change today is?
Ooh, you have so many.
Yeah. Boy, we could go A to Z, but the first name that popped to my mind is Tom Werner, CEO of SunPower.
SunPower, okay. These are yes or no questions. Ken Alex, nationally speaking, Republicans have achieved more environmental protection over the past 50 years than Democrats. Yes or no?
I would say yes.
Carl Guardino, Silicon Valley companies are adequately prepared for sea level rise.
No, but working on it.
There's a tremendous map that BCDC has of sea level rise, and Oracle and Google and Facebook, they're all going to be kayaking to their office.
We wanted to go to the ballot last year, but the climate, excuse the pun, wasn't quite right with voters.
There'll be something maybe next year on the ballot in June, perhaps. Dorothy Rothrock, AB 32 and other parts of California's climate plan enjoy broad support among California's citizens. Yes or no?
Yes, because they haven't seen the price yet.
Ken Alex, a California grid with 100% renewable power is achievable in your lifetime.
Absolutely.
Kevin Faulconer, Republicans need to get real on climate change to win statewide offices in California.
I think a lot of them already are.
Dorothy, your friends and family sometimes press you to be greener. Yes or no?
There's a reason she wore red today.
No.
Carl, VCs are not as smart as they think they are, and their energy investments prove it.
VCs put their wallets where their words are, and they need to be right about 2 out of every 10 times. They usually are.
Okay. Last one.
That means they're wrong 8 times out of 10.
That was a lot. Kevin Faulconer. Every mayor in California who's not in rehab or under indictment wants to be governor.
Why did you exclude those?
Well, it's from San Diego, so it's not taken for granted there, right?
I appreciate the question, thank you.
All right,
I'm just happy what I'm doing.
in all fairness, I got that from John McCain
Yeah,
many years
that's
ago,
good.
who said that about members of Congress. Carl Guardino, you talked about Silicon Valley and their muscle. One thing that those companies are not doing is using their balance sheets. They've got a lot of cash in those companies, and they're probably invested in coal companies. Should Silicon Valley use its hordes of cash, huge balance sheets, to move away from fossil fuels?
Well, you're making an assumption about how they're using their cash that I'm not sure I agree with. But in terms of where that cash is, a lot of that cash is earned in market ways around the world by competing for customers around the world. And our U.S. tax code, which currently taxes that at 39.4% with federal and state tax, prevents you from bringing it back and working for the American economy. So one, we all need to board a plane, go to D.C. together and get better comprehensive tax reform, not only for families but for companies to make us more competitive. Then we could bring a lot of that cash back and we can invest more in facilities, equipment, people, shareholders, others who believe in our American companies prospering and growing here. Where they currently invest it, there are 7,200 high-tech companies in Silicon Valley, 2,500 bio and med tech companies, hundreds of clean and green tech companies. Where any particular company might invest its money, I don't know.
Sure,
Frank.
sure.
Let alone all of them.
Right, thinking of Apple's $100 billion in cash, that sort of thing.
Yeah, most of that's been earned overseas, and they would love to bring it back. But at 39.4%, there is no way you can rationalize to your shareholders or your employees or anyone else being able to do so.
One of the bills, SB 189, is about investing or divesting from coal companies. Stanford did that. Carl Guardino, is divestment on your radar in terms of where making statements against coal companies? Ken just mentioned sort of the politicization of coal. Is divestment on your radar?
Yeah, no, that's not what we work on at the leadership group in terms of policy, so I wouldn't know.
Okay. Let's go to high-speed rail. Quite a big issue. Kevin Faulconer, it's not going to go to San Diego, or is it? Do you want it to go to?
It's not scheduled to. I mean,
Would you like it to?
Well, some of the issues, the biggest issue in terms of is cost and the long-term funding source, and that's still to be identified. I think that's why you see that big, huge question mark in terms of what will ultimately happen.
Dorothy Rothrock, view on high-speed rail? Too expensive?
We don't have a position on high-speed rail, but we are concerned about the way cap-and-trade funds may be used for it. We're not sure that it's particularly legal, given the delayed emission reductions and that the monies were raised under AB 32 for between now and 2020.
Ken, Alex, even some very strong supporters of the governor, Green people, are also a little bit concerned about that reach into cap-and-trade funds for high-speed rail.
So high-speed rail, if you think about what California looks like without high-speed rail, perhaps you would change your view. So we need to move people north and south. To do that, you need more airports and more airport space. In order to avoid that, high-speed rail is an incredibly cost-effective alternative if you can think about what it would cost to expand various airports in the Bay Area and in Southern California. Beyond that, high-speed rail, if we do it right and well, which we must insist upon, is also about land use, particularly in the Central Valley. Right now, the Central Valley is the poorest region of the state, and it's missing economic opportunity. High-speed rail will bring some of that opportunity by bringing the region closer to the coast. In addition, its development pattern is sprawl, which we're very familiar with. High-speed rail gives us the possibility of having continuity and connectivity among development and transportation. So instead of developing endlessly into prime farmland, what if we have a higher density development around existing cities like depressed areas like Madera, Fresno's downtown, Merced, all up and down the cities that currently exist, not into farmland and into open space, and have a different economic model. All of that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and is a different vision of the state.
We heard about fracking earlier in the shout out. Mayor Faulconer, do you have a view on fracking?
That's not been part of our discussion down in
Hasn't
San
reached down there
Diego
yet?
at all. No.
Dorothy, do you think it's a good thing for California?
You know, fracking is the result of huge technological improvements in the way of, it's going to make us able to exploit huge reserves of energy that will help make us energy independent. It's of huge value to the state, and if it can be done safely, we ought to be able to use those technologies.
Yesterday on Meet the Press, Ken Alex, Governor Brown defended fracking, saying if we don't frack in the state, we have to get oil by rail or by ship, both which are problematic. But fracking during a drought gives people a lot of concern. So how can you assure Californians that fracking during a drought, they're not going to poison water or use a lot of water?
Yeah, well, it's important that the rules are followed, that the water that's used is not drinking water, that it's not put into drinking water and impacted. California is working and is close to finalizing rules for how fracking should be done to protect exactly that set of resources.
Should California change the way that water is priced, have flexible pricing? We pay different prices for electricity, different times of day, different seasons of the year. Should that happen on water?
Is that a yes or no, or do you want like a few hours on that? So I was telling Gary Hart here just before we came up to the stage that I spent about 25 years at the Attorney General's office trying to avoid issues around water. There is no avoiding it in California. Our rules around water pricing, around water marketing, around water rights are in serious need of reevaluation. So I'm going to kind of punt and say we need some serious thought about how to do that. And because of this incredibly devastating drought that's really only in year 4, and we hope, towards the end, but we don't know, we're going to have a serious discussion about what to do around water in a very serious way in the next year.
Carl Guardino, does water matter in Silicon Valley other than the consumption? Does it matter as a matter of business risk?
Yes, it matters a great deal. It matters to every person in the state and every bit of the economy of this state. My friends who live in San Francisco, for example, and our companies who are thriving in San Francisco depend on technology derived 70 years ago on how from really hydraulics, how we could get water from the Hetch Hetchy all the way to San Francisco and other parts of the Bay Area. So when we look at a water plan, what is that based on? Well, it's based on having a place to store it, in that case, Hetch Hetchy, a way to convey it, which they do marvelously efficiently. It also depends on efficiency and conservation. So everything we do around water needs to be around all 4 elements. And then there are technological advances, as we saw again 70 years ago, that we can magnify now to squeeze out every drop that we can as effectively as possible. But does it impact Silicon Valley? In a huge way for every company, no matter what cluster of the economy. You mentioned high-speed rail, though, and you asked the other 3, so let me just weigh in quickly. Do we have a position on it at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group? Yes, we do. On balance, we support it. Concerns when it was even on the ballot about the estimates of cost, the estimates of how quickly it could be delivered, and the estimates of ridership. Those concerns were borne out. We're glad that Governor Brown had someone with the sharp of a pencil, as my friend Michael Rossi, look at how we could bring those numbers down. He brought it down from 119 billion to about 69 billion. That's a pretty darn sharp pencil. But where we are mainly focused around regional transportation are those connections, not only to high-speed rail, but to our communities as a whole. That's why we've led 4 successful transportation funding measures, $12 billion in 30 years, including BART extensions, Caltrain improvements, and electrification, Mayor Faulconer light rail in our community, buses, express buses, bike ped facilities, et cetera, because it has to be a part of a whole system to make sure that transit works for its link to climate change.
I think we have to go to audience questions. I think there's some microphones there. in the audience, so put your hand up in the microphone. First one will be right here. Yes. Welcome.
Thank you. You know, right here in Sacramento, little Sacramento, people don't think of it, but the company that, you know, the type of company you want to see building here, we already have it here. You know, multinational, the Siemens company. Yeah. You talk about who's building the cars that people ride on in this country and in Canada, yeah, on their light rail. They're built here. You know, they're building the high. You know, they're building low emissions. They're building low emissions trains and all this, but you know, they're building it in a factory with solar panels that power it and so forth. How do you find more companies in this state or bring them here that are doing this kind of thing of like, we advance the transit elsewhere and all by building it here in high-paying jobs in the poor Central Valley and so forth?
Dorothy Rothrock, pretty good example. Is that policy-driven, Siemens?
I don't know Siemens' particular story. Actually, I'm going on a tour there next month, so I'm looking forward to learning more about that.
Light rail, I think. Yeah.
You know, companies will choose to be where it makes sense for their markets, their costs, their employees, skilled workforce, whatever issues they've got with site location. So not every company is going to be in California, but then not every company needs to be out of California. I think we're not getting our fair share because I think there's a whole lot of policies that if they could just be adjusted relatively minorly, we could attract a lot more manufacturing. There's a lot of things other than energy costs that affect the equation, and I don't think we should ignore those. My main problem, and if it's the last thing I say today, you know, that's enough, is that we haven't taken steps to overcome some of the new requirements we're putting on companies. If you're going to put on a new requirement, look at the other requirements and see what you can relieve. We have high work comp, high taxes. Cap and trade is too onerous, it could be backed off. There's no reason why we should be putting the burdens on manufacturing that we are. We can get to our climate goals by backing off some of those burdens.
No one argues California is a low-cost place to do business. We have about 10 minutes left, so let's try to get as many quick questions and answers as we can. Hi, welcome.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. My name is Stacy Heaton, and I'm with the Rural County Representatives of California. We have 34 member counties statewide, and my counties are largely the stewards of the water that the urban areas get, and they're largely the stewards of the trees that help provide that water. And as we know, a lot of our trees are burning down. And in the midst of the drought, there's not a whole lot of water to go around. And we know there's a prevailing sentiment right now, and we do not have a position on state of Jefferson. I just want to make that clear before I say this, but there's a prevailing sentiment right now that the state doesn't care about rural California. And the way that cap and trade dollars are being disseminated right now, it doesn't help that sentiment because rural California is going to see very little benefit other than the Central Valley from those cap and trade funds. With the move away from resources-based industries such as logging, again with our trees burning down, it doesn't make it very attractive for people to come up into the smoke and, you know, do recreational activities in our counties. So I guess my question would be, how can we sort of direct these great economic benefits and the cap and trade funds out to where it gets out and benefits the entire state and not just targeted towards, say, urban areas in the Central Valley?
Ken, Alex?
So it's a fair question to make sure that we have a good balance of investment around the state. So there are a lot of investments going to rural areas, not just in the Central Valley. We're going to be investing pretty heavily in biofuels, of which the forests are a huge source and also connected to to water and reducing fire loads. We're investing in all kinds of efforts to promote more commerce in forested areas. 18% of energy usage is around water, and we need to figure out how to connect the cost of things like biofuel plants, which tend to cost more for power, with the fact that they're also cleaning water. So we're looking very carefully at those kinds of investments. It's a challenge, admittedly. Cap and trade investment just started. I'm the chair of something called the Strategic Growth Council, which is doing investments around the state, and we just have accepted 52 applications from around the state for projects. A very significant percentage of those are in rural areas, and I expect to see a good chunk of the money to go there. And there are a number of other programs that we can talk about in some detail perhaps after.
Next question, where's the microphone? Right here? I think we have one up here too.
I have a quick question for Mr. Ken Alex of the governor's office. We're focusing on you, unfortunately. You said quickly in the lightning round that prophets of catastrophe are wrong. I believe I heard you say that. And given that we're at
I had to either say right or wrong, so I didn't get to be too subtle with it.
Okay, then maybe you can clarify it. It's been said that we're in decade zero right now, just as if this was patient zero for an Ebola outbreak. This is decade zero where everything's critical. We're already looking at 2 degrees centigrade floor, that's a given. And then if we go to 4 degrees centigrade warming, that we're going to be a point of no return. Major climate disruption is on the way. I was confused by your statement. Maybe you can clarify that. Thank you.
Well, look, the science is depressing and concerning, and the governor has certainly called this an existential crisis, and I think all of us are here in part because we are extremely worried about it. California, as I said, is doing what it's doing because we take it extremely seriously, even if the U.S. Congress does not. So I don't want to minimize or be glib about the idea that we're not heading for catastrophe. On the other hand, look, let me go back to the first thing I said. Over the past 10 years, we've made incredible progress. And Carl's list of the things that he's working on in his own personal life that give us some hope. One thing that I haven't talked about is storage. California is the world's leader on energy storage. That has the potential to radically change our situation. If we can commodify electricity in the way that wheat and other things are commodities, instead of having to balance it minute by minute, we can change how we produce energy. We can change our transportation system to be electrified. We can really change multiple industries. And so there are places here to be optimistic, and California is the leading light on that, and I, for one, am not going to say we're heading towards doom.
Yes, quick question.
I just had a question about, and from any of the speakers, about what's the role that distributed generation can play. We're looking at converting into large-scale solar. We're already relying on large-scale wind projects. And it seems like there's a huge opportunity in places like San Diego and LA and all over the state, really, for rooftop solar and other distributed generation. What can we do to incentivize that? And what's the path you all may see going forward for that?
Mayor Faulconer?
Let me just jump in, because one of the stats in terms of San Diego is #1 per capita in terms of solar installations. We're very proud of that. Want to increase that. And the point we were just talking about, I think the real that takes us to the next level in this state and in this country is going to be storage. I'm convinced of that. We've got some phenomenal companies that are doing great things down in San Diego, and our utility is as well. SDG&E on how do we capture that? That will change the ballgame. And that is, again, back to technology, back to innovation, and encouraging that. I think that is one of our best opportunities for success. That it's hard to predict where we're going to be if we were all sitting here in about 3 or 4 years from now, but the ability and the capacity that is growing from a storage standpoint is exciting. And I think that in large part has a lot to do with not only a sustainable future, but our economic future in California.
It's the holy grail. Are we getting the hook, Mark? One more question. Last question. Where's the microphone? Who's the lucky one? Right there.
So, I've heard a lot about high-speed rail, but very little about high-speed internet infrastructure as a means of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I work at Valley Vision here in Sacramento, and we run the CPUC-sponsored broadband consortium here. And we've identified a lot of ways that, say, precision agriculture, regulation of water levels, and other means of using broadband can reduce greenhouse gas emissions greatly, reduce VMT in a number of ways. But I am from rural Mendocino County, and in 2015, the house I grew up in still is on dial-up. So there is a massive issue with broadband infrastructure, both economically and from a greenhouse gas perspective.
Ken Alex.
Oh, I get that one, not Carl?
Well, I think of it as a CPUC, it's a policy thing. I know that Kathy Sandoval is very dialed into that.
I absolutely agree. We are deficient in broadband access, particularly in some of the more rural areas of the state. It's something the governor is aware of, that the PUC is working on, and we have a fair amount of work to do to get there.
Carl.
And just really quickly on your point about agriculture and the use of technology, I think of great Silicon Valley companies like Trimble Navigation that pinpoint with millimeter accuracy exactly where each drip in a farmer's field needs to go in order to be as efficient and effective as possible with their crops, as well as inexpensive with their work. And there is such a marriage between agriculture and technology that it's exciting to see, and it's only growing.
Let's give a thanks to our panelists.
Greg, terrific job with this panel today, moderating it. And Kevin and Dorothy and Carl and Ken, thank you very much. And Donna, thank you for the wonderful welcome that you gave. I don't know about the rest of you who are sitting in the audience today, but I learned a lot from this conversation. And one of the hardest jobs I had today is coming up here and having to stop it, because I was learning more and more as we went along. Obviously a very important topic. You know, we appreciate the sponsors who made it possible for us to invite you all for a free lunch today and make this program possible. So I want to thank them once again. I also want to thank all of you for coming out, for your interest in the topic. I think you agree with us and what we heard from the panel today, a very important issue. We hope that you all stay involved and interested in this topic. Please fill out the forms before you leave, the evaluation of our program. And the next part of our program, the next event, will be on April 15th. Back here, we have an event on civic engagement and voter participation with the Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. And we hope to see some of you here as well. Some of you have interest in many topics like we do at PPIC. So thank you. Have a wonderful day, and really appreciate your interest.
Thanks to PPIC.